How was that for you? Because obviously your attributes were quite skillful. Did you ever show players up during that period of trying to prove yourself and going into an environment where there's probably a little bit of insecurity because you're trying to take their place and you're maybe the homegrown young player that has this potential?
Yeah, I mean, there was, of course. I mean, but the things that kind of happened back then. I mean, you're going back nearly 20 years. There's things that happened probably in the first team environment back then wouldn't happen nowadays. Yeah, the way the first team kind of treated you, you were like a young boy, and the way you get spoken to was kind of like you were getting tested, I suppose, every single day to see if you had the mentality, I think, to be able to handle it. Now I think it's that kind of older school generation, the way of thinking's kind of it's gone from football now. I suppose it's probably gone from most aspects of modern day life, hasn't it? Because a lot of people can't say a lot without getting in trouble these days, whereas back then it was kind of anything went, really. But it was good though. It was a harsh environment to go into, but it kind of made you, I suppose, resilient in a way.
But a bit of a sink or swim environment.
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much. If you couldn't handle the first team players shouting at you and telling you how bad they thought you were in training, then you were pretty much you were left by the wayside, really.
Do you think that's the difference then in terms of mentality? Do you think that's kind of a key aspect to break into that first team and then have the opportunity? You mentioned all those aspects earlier, but do you think that's kind of the key ingredient in terms of keeping a consistency and keeping that mentality to prove a point and cope with maybe the demands of older football players?
Yeah, I do, and I think that's probably something that I said is gone from football nowadays. I mean, the things that probably happened back when I was breaking into the first team, players and coaches would get pulled up in front of HR now for that sort of stuff. But in a way, like I said, that's kind of the things that kind of made you resilient and mentally strong, I think. Well, my first day of training with Celtic, I was miles off it, with the first team, miles off it, and I was told, and I was shouted at. But then the next time I was training with them, I was kind of like, I can't let that happen again. Whereas nowadays, you see kind of a lot of younger players trying to break into the first team, and it's kind of like almost they're not really told what they're doing wrong, well, they maybe are, but not in the same way. And it's kind of like, well, I think the way that the environment I came up in was a lot, not saying produced better players, but produced a probably stronger, a harder mentality in them.
So you get your opportunity to play for Celtic. I'm intrigued on that process of being a homegrown player and supporting Celtic, and maybe your family grew up as Celtic fans, and that added pressure. How did you cope with that as a homegrown player and playing for your boyhood club? Was a demand that you put on yourself, and how did you cope with that to perform?
To be honest, I didn't take much notice of it, really. It's just that my like I said, my whole game and mindset was to become a first team player at Celtic. Obviously, being from Glasgow, being a Celtic fan, and your family Celtic fans, there is added pressure, and there was probably added pressure on the fact that I was probably seen as the one who was going to come through. But I didn't take too much notice of it. I thought I've got to do everything that I can to not have any regrets or excuses, and made all the sacrifices that I had to make to try and become a first team player at Celtic.
How do you cope with maybe old phone fixtures then, as a fan going into those big games and the media attention? What's kind of the mindset going into those games? Can you share what a week?
Yeah, it's just it'd be different for myself compared to probably a foreigner who's come up to Celtic, because you know how much it means to everybody who supports Celtic. As being a fan yourself, you know what it means, and you know what it means to win, and you know what it means to lose. Yeah, I think the first Celtic Rangers game I played in, it was different. It was totally different to any other game I played in. It was just the noise and the kind of the atmosphere. It was on a different level to anything I played in before. And even myself, I thought you feel a bit not nervous in a way, but you were like, there was a different atmosphere, a different lead into the game, the whole thing. And probably a lot of that was coming from myself as well, because you knew it was an Old Firm game and a Celtic Rangers game.
How do you kind of balance those emotions then, Aiden? If it's, you got to, make sure that you're performing, it's just another game and you've got all the atmosphere and everything that's surrounding such a big fixture. How do you kind of keep present and make sure that you perform to the best of your ability?
Well, I think you just kind of, I say this to a lot of players nowadays. I think it's don't get too high with the highs and don't get too lows with the lows. It's kind of just try and be in the middle. It's like social media and things like that have probably a big part to play in a footballer's mindset these days. A lot of players have Instagram, Twitter, whatever, but I think just kind of stay balanced and not get too positive when, don't think you're the best player in the world when you've played well, and don't think you're the worst player in the world when you've had a nightmare. Let's just kind of stay in the middle at all times. That's kind of the way that I've kind of always approached it.
Just a quick one to let you know that over 90% of those that watch this channel do not subscribe. So if you haven't already, please click the subscribe button down below. The bigger the channel, the bigger the guests, and more importantly, it's absolutely free. Enjoy the episode.
Was there any leaders in the dressing room that, on reflection of your time, maybe at a younger age, that inspired you or made sure that you stuck to those values, as you said, of just trying to keep some emotional intelligence and not get too carried away with certain things? Was there anyone that was important to you during that period of your career?
I think the manager, to be fair, Martin O'Neill was quite like that. I think my first Champions League start against AC Milan. I think I was 18, but I played really well that game. And after the game, him and John Robertson kind of pulled me aside, and they were like, it was almost like, listen, don't get too ahead of yourself, because there might be a lot of things being said about you now. Don't read into things too much. Where people might say you've played amazing and you're the next best thing. Just kind of try and stay grounded. It was kind of that. I remember they pulled me to the side. It was after the game, and it was almost like, keep your feet on the ground a little bit. And I remember that obviously quite vividly to this day.
And what was the Champions League like in terms of playing those big games as well? I suppose a similar in a sense in terms of atmosphere and what it means to the club, but obviously different competition, European football, different level of football. How was that adaptation going into those big games? You mentioned AC Milan. I'm sure there was other big games, Benfica and other well-remembered games.
Yeah, there was a lot of. I mean, Celtic most seasons we play Champions League. It's different. Obviously, it's different. You're going up a level in terms of standard and player you're playing against, but kind of something that always struck with me and stayed with me was, don't just be a Celtic first team player. It was be a Celtic first team player who is in the Champions League, who's playing in the Champions League, not just don't be happy just to play 10 games for Celtic and then that's you think you've made it. That was Tommy Burns who kind of said that to us. You realise the level was different. Of course it was. We were Celtic against AC Milan, Man United, Barcelona, and the level was different. But I think once we used to, when I was at Celtic, we won a lot of games against them at home. Against a lot of those teams at home. Probably partly due to the crowd and partly due to the atmosphere in the stadium and the effect that it has on Champions League nights. But it's just about, I suppose, finding the balance, isn't it? And figuring out how you can win that game, really. I mean, a lot of times we played defensively and ended up winning by a set piece or by a moment of individual brilliance, maybe. But they were the games that you were kind of almost judged on, I suppose. The league games where you're at Celtic, you're expected to beat Motherwell at home and St Mirren at home, and everybody. If you don't, there's a real backlash. The Champions League nights were they were the best games. They were the games that everybody wants to play in.
You mentioned the crowd. Did you get a sense during matches that the opposition would crumble under the atmosphere there? It's famous for its atmosphere. So
yeah, No, never. I never got. I never got the vote, but they obviously, and maybe a subconscious way, some of them probably did, because we ended up winning a lot of games at home. I think we beat Barcelona at home, Man United, AC Milan. But again, away from home, we would always end up losing. But I think a lot of the players, I've read interviews and things where little snippets of people talking about playing at Celtic Park and saying it was maybe one of the best atmospheres that they've been involved in football. I think Xavi, or was it Iniesta, was speaking about it. They are special nights. They are special nights at Celtic Park.
What was Nakamura like? I remember his famous free kicks. You mentioned Man United. What was he like as a player? Because obviously you see the Japanese players there at Celtic at the moment, and from a cultural point of view, and you mentioned a lot of homegrown players and European players. Obviously, being from Japan, how was that for him going into those big games?
Yeah, he was a really good football player, like intelligent, very, very technically good, very fit as well. But in terms of integrating into the squad, he didn't really, because he never spoke English, which I found was he's probably one of the examples that I use to this day, where coaches are always talking about shout for the ball and communicate. I never heard him shout for the ball once, ever. But he used to still receive the ball. So he's probably the exception to the rule, where coaches tell you to shout and be vocal. He never did, but he always received the ball because he was in the right position and players trusted him with the ball. It must have been strange for him, but he just got on with his job. I think he was at Celtic for maybe 3-4 years. He was a top class player. Like amazing technique, amazing left foot, great vision. A bit of a kind of unearthed a bit of a gem, I suppose, in a way, because I think we signed him from Regina, and no one really knew anything about him when he signed. And then I think his first game, everyone was like, "Oh, this guy's a bit of a player," a bit of a. Because I suppose it is always that way when unknown players come into your environment. And he was from Japan. It's been in Serie A with Regina, I think. But we hadn't seen much of him at all. But then when you play with him and play alongside him, you see that you've seen the kind of the talent he had.
It's interesting, especially from a coach pedagogy point of view, especially thinking about communications and how he integrates so well without speaking the languages. It's probably something that's makes you challenge your coaching role now at United in certain ways.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be saying I'm not the type of coach. I'm not the type of coach who would say be vocal. I think be vocal when you think there's something to say, but not just be vocal for the sake of being vocal. Because I mean, it's one of my pet hates, actually. Players being really vocal in a warm up and about having a good warm up before a game and thinking things are done right, but that has no bearing on the game whatsoever. No bearing whatsoever. You hear people shouting in the warm up about, "Let's have a good warm up," and yeah, that's good. That was really good. Take that into the game, and then the first time the ball comes to you, the ball might go under your foot out of play, but you had a good warm up. So what bearing does that have on the game? None whatsoever. So I'm probably against that in a way. I think if you are that way and you want to be vocal because you want to be vocal and it's part of something you need to get out of you, that's fine. But I'm not that type of player. So I think I speak when something has to be said, as opposed to and then the opposite, when something doesn't have to be said, I would just carry on and concentrate on one game.